The devil's in the details. When Sam Lewis stepped out of the elevator, there were a few people in the office that knew what that meant. Bankruptcy, liquidation, and layoffs. Maybe there would be a few months, but it was more likely there were only weeks. The signs were there, what with no more overtime, the water cooler stopped being refilled, and now the greatest symbol of company death in Manhattan just arrived. The hiss of serpents quickly filled the area. No one loved the sin of gossip more than office employees, and their whispers instantly drowned out the radio. Yet the sun shone brighter through the windows at the top floor of the building once he appeared. Eyes trailed the man into the big boss's office. Many of the voices talked about his beauty. His skin was the color of the sun-lightened mane of a lion that was draped over enough muscle and fat that proved he enjoyed his own body. His hair, black as coal, and it waved and curled in a current that begged to be pulled. Just as the lusting eyes drank in their view, the door closed and the clouds covered the sun. Back to business as usual. "Clay, did you see?" Aisha asked from over the cubicle wall. They were buddies, but they never really hung out outside of work, not that they didn't want to. "He's definitely your type." The man shook his head. He heard the commotion and knew who was there, but he didn't care. The man was anyone's type, after all. There was work to do, and the faster he got it done, the faster he could fix his resume and apply for positions elsewhere. It was sad, honestly. This was a good company, and Clay enjoyed the work he did. He got to meet a lot of people. Public access entertainment does a lot of heavy lifting for educating children in the media. His department worked to recruit music artists to fill empty ad space with music videos. 7 years he was able to give to this place. "I'm sure he is, but I think dating the harbinger of business death would be reductive," he said, rolling his eyes. He glanced over to his coworker. She still had a mischievous look in her eyes. "He's probably a douche anyway. Check the shoes. Aubrey Oxford. They're stoned, which makes them custom. How vain." It became noticeably warmer in the cubicle. "You know shoes?" That was not Aisha's voice. The voice was cool as ice with the heat of a challenge. The voice of Sam Lewis. Why did this have to happen? Having to open his big mouth got him caught up in whatever this was. Embarrassing himself in front of someone who must have a lot of sway in the industry was not what he had planned for this afternoon. As long as he kept his composure and didn't grovel, Clay would walk out of this unscathed. He hoped. Spinning in his chair to make eye contact, he was struck by a piercing stare. His downturned eyes were accentuated by the blackest coal he'd ever seen. Full lips turned up, and he just knew there were perfect teeth poised to bite behind them. This man was beautiful. God help him. "I know a lot of things." "Then I'm sure you know that money isn't the only way to pay for custom shoes." The eyes that burned into his broke contact to sweep down his body and back up. Clay felt as if he was being sized up by a constrictor to become his next meal. "Perhaps one as ambrosial as you would like to hear the story over dinner?" What? This could not be happening. No way. No way would he accept. This was just a way to be put in his place by someone he would most likely never see again. He inhaled to decline, but he will. He would love to, but you'll have to pick him up. "Splendid. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something I can easily see on the floor," Sam said before giving a wink and turning in those stoned Oxford shoes. And just like that, he was gone. The temperature in the area had cooled back down. Clay hated that Aisha did that. He hated that he knew what ambrosial meant, and even more than that, he hated that the charm worked on him. And now, he had a date in a few hours. Something easily seen on the floor? The man flicked through the hangers in his dimly lit closet. Nothing seemed right. There were T-shirts, some plain, and others with a simple pattern. He could go with a button-down with short sleeves and black pants. The black pants were mandatory for several reasons. He looked himself up and down in the mirror, but with a different eye than Sam had earlier in the day. Clay was average height and a bit fuller than his genetics had in mind for his narrow shoulders. He had a love-hate relationship with lifting weights, but did enough that he wasn't hopeless in the muscle department. In his mind, he was physically regular, and didn't stand out except for the random encounter here and there that said otherwise. In the end, he settled on a gray Henley and black pants. It then dawned on him that he was being picked up. Sam didn't know where he lived. He laughed out loud at the realization. That was his way of getting back at him. Let him get excited and dolled up only to not have anywhere to go. At least the humiliation happened where no one else would see. But then, his cell phone screen lit up with an unknown number calling in. It was too coincidental not to be Sam, so Clay answered. "Hello?" "Clay, I believe I'm in front of your building," Sam said. He asked how he got the other man's number, to which his answer was, "I, too, know a lot of things." He assumed that Sam got his personal info from his boss, so he let his suspicion slide. The ride in the elevator found Clay giddy with excitement. He allowed himself to feel the thrum coursing out from his spine toward the tips of his fingers and making him smile. The ding and opening of doors struck fear into his heart, making his palms sweat and toes go cold. In moments, he would be in the same vehicle with a very powerful man. The sun had started to sink toward the early spring horizon. The city smog layered over the sunset was always pretty. The chill in the air was welcome, coming from the stuffy lobby he'd just stepped out of, even if it smelled of garbage and grease. Then his eyes noticed the car that was picking him up. It was a simple, white, four-door Toyota Camry. Though the windows were tinted, it was a little surprising for his ride to be arriving in something so normal. When the passenger window rolled down, the street lights seemed to brighten. The familiar coal-darkened eyes looked into his, and he began the short journey to join the man. There was no leather interior, only polyester. The heat wasn't on, but it was warm enough to take off the sweater. Now, that would be playing into things a bit too early. Clay wasn't on the menu unless Sam earned it. There was a fragrance he couldn't place, but it was rich and heady. It was intrusive and intoxicating, but not unpleasant by any means. It swirled around him like smoke. He wanted to smell more of it. "Don't look so nervous, it's only dinner," Sam said, breaking the silence. The man in the passenger seat hardly noticed they'd begun to move. That was very true. It was only dinner. Nothing had to come of it. Did he actually think the man driving the car was a douche? No. He preferred to believe that people were good until proven otherwise, and Sam would be no different and deserved a chance. So Clay just stared out the window and watched the storefronts and lights pass by. "You look heavenly, by the way." The words were simply said. Sweetly, even. The compliment made him smile. His cheeks burned, but he would blame the temperature of the cabin. The two ended up making empty small talk until they found themselves outside of a little Thai restaurant. It wasn't a very long drive. Clay knew this place. It was one of his favorites. Perhaps tonight would go better than he thought it would. The restaurant was comfortable, and the music was low. When they stepped inside, the sound of the usual instrumental music was accompanied by the whispers of snakes, the second time that day. This time, the host recognized both men, but greeted Sam by name before showing them to their table. They were sat at a table that was tucked into a quiet alcove across from a massive painting of the Buddha. The subject himself gleaming and gilded with stripes of crimson and emerald to pull the eye in. That made two beautiful things that sat before him. Clay was truly captivated by the man sitting across from him. Rather than feeling panic or insecurity, there was a calmness that settled over him. His mind wandered because of it, making him wonder what Sam was short for. "Samael." He was yanked out of his daze. "Huh?" It came out with an unintended attitude. "I wanted to tell you that my first name is Samael," he said. The smile that flashed across the table was radiant and devilish, just delicious. "I prefer not to share it because the whole names have power thing." Clay nodded. He understood. He wasn't exactly religious, but his spirituality paved the way for certain beliefs. Names having power was certainly one of them. If you knew a spirit's name, you could control it. He also knew where Sam's name came from. The severity of God. Yes. Solemn. God's favorite angel, and his most beautiful. That, too. You must know the most important part, then. Was that shame in his voice? Something in Clay didn't want to say it, but there was something that begged him to say it out loud. It made him uneasy, as if holding on to the words would make him sick. Swirling around in his stomach and hanging in the ether around them, he said, "The one who was—" "Sammy?" an excited voice called out. "My sweetie!" A full-figured woman with wrinkles and freckles wrapped her arms around his date with a tight squeeze. Her white hair was pulled into a tight bun on her head. She laughed and continued to hug him. No one on earth was immune to the aunties and the grannies, and seeing this man be reduced to a smushed face was satisfying. A man of such power was now nothing more than a village boy. When she released him, he put his hands together and bowed his forehead to his fingertips. "So wasti ka?" Then a full conversation in Thai ensued. Just like that, he was pulled deeper into the man who was named after an angel. At this point, he was starting to believe he was one. Clay just dropped his eyes to the menu, even though he knew what he wanted already. It was only a moment or two before Sam gestured toward him and was formally introduced to Miss Yui. "Sammy helped my family open this restaurant when we first moved to the U.S. I owe so much to him." Miss Yui beamed as she told the story. Sam shook his head with a theatric roll of his eyes and a smile. Now, Miss Yui, the deal was, I help you open the restaurant, and you teach me how to make Kao Niao Ma Muang. So you owe me nothing." Their orders were placed, and they were alone again. There were questions that hung on his lips, and for a moment Clay wondered if they would be answered by only thinking them. Wouldn't have been the first time that day. The same questions he wanted answers to were then posed by the man across the table. No, he was an only child. Yes, he dated 2 girls before. He grew up out in the Bible Belt and found himself not buying into the satanic panic of it all and moved far away. He went to school and found himself, and got fired from jobs and this and that here and there, all of that landing him in public broadcast entertainment in New York City. The entire time he spoke, Sam listened and watched. He watched Clay's lips move, his eyes light up or darken with what he said. He watched his hands move along with the speech to paint some abstract picture of the conversation. They were briefly interrupted when the food arrived, but the tables were quickly turned. It was now Sam's turn to answer. "I have many brothers, but they don't talk to me. I was alienated by my father so long ago that I'm not even sure I remember what it was actually about." He trailed off, bringing a spoonful of evil jungle prince to his mouth. He went on to explain how he ended up where he was at his own life. Being an outcast from his family sent him on a bitter journey to help others. He had the means to make someone else's dreams come true, but for a price. That price varied on the intention of the aspirations. "Miss Yui?" Clay asked. She wanted to help her family and feed her community, so the price was cheap. No selling her soul or that Hollywood bullshit. He laughed, and it sounded like music carried it across the table. That was quite commendable. This guy was a big softy, it seemed. Their first kiss happened outside Clay's apartment door. Sam was invited in, but he declined. Something about wanting to remain a gentleman. The second one was kind and gentle. Next time, then? Deal. That salacious smile from Sam would stick with him for a while. Several months went by, and the two were strewn together in Sam's bed, enjoying the afterglow of consummation. Bites and marks were left all over Clay's skin, marking him, so anyone who saw would know he belonged to someone. It was his dirty little, not-so-secret secret. Everyone in the office knew the two were an item, and at the same time, the business was on the up and up. Just like their first date, questions were swirling around them. "What would you say if I told you that I loved you?" Dark curls hung in Sam's eyes, a shield in place of the event of rejection. Clay had felt it for a little while already, but he knew that Sam would have to say it first, the whole daddy issues thing. "I would say that I love you too." "And what if—" The man's voice stalled for a few seconds. His eyes darted to the side. "What if I told you that I truly am the devil?" Was he serious? He figured playing along would be the best idea. He looked down to the dark skin of Sam's chest he'd become so familiar with. "I don't think the devil is truly evil, if that's what you're getting at. Misunderstood, sure, but not evil. I think he would be understanding. Shit, he'd probably have more mercy than God." Those must have been the right words to say, as when their eyes met again, he was crying. "I was cast from heaven because I would not love man the way I worshipped my Father. For centuries I showed humans that my Father's word is not the only law." Sparks and embers silently crept along the path of Sam's veins. Clay watched as patches of the man's skin ashed away to reveal silvery scars. He was awestruck and horrified, but would not look away. Instead, he brought his fingers to press out the cinders. Strangely enough, it didn't burn. Clay pulled him closer to his chest and allowed whatever the hell was going on to continue. The scent of sulfur and smoke replaced the usual intoxicating vetiver and spice. The weeping went on for several minutes, and when Sam had calmed down, all of the skin on his body had been burned away, and from his back several oozing stumps revealed themselves. His wings must have been there. Perhaps this Samael was, in fact, the devil. It would explain the money, the deals, and knowing what Clay wanted to say before speaking it out loud. The way people could not look away once he entered a room. It always sounded like snakes hissing and rattling their tails when others talked about him, even Aisha. The sun shined brighter around him, and not even the city lights at midnight could pierce how much darker it was when they shared a bed. He found the only thing left untouched was his face, when it was lifted to gaze upon the man above him. "Be not afraid," echoed through the man's mind with the angel's voice as Sam's eyes pleaded. The charge, held in the silence, could have destroyed all the electronics in the building. Being shut out of my father's light for so many millennia left me without knowing what love is anymore. But things have changed, all because of you. The fear in Clay's heart trickled away, as it now bled with sorrow. What was there to say? Sam revealed that he knew when others were lying. He also shared that he knew that wasn't his first name, and even Sam wasn't sure of his own anymore. "Please, my love, tell me your first name." He didn't tell people because his name came from the same reasons he left home: the contradictions between the followers and the written word, the bigotry, being kicked out of his home because of his sexuality. Only his closest friends knew it in case of emergencies. When he left, he rebuilt himself to be just himself, and not some vessel for the church or his parents to pour their guilt into. But if he loved this man, and this fallen angel was able to put his trust in him, Clay would do the same. Adam